The Wall is a novel set in a world that has suffered catastrophic and irreversible climate change. The wall of the title is a 5 metre high concrete barrier that runs all the way around essentially Great Britain, a fictionalised future version of Great Britain. And the wall is there for two reasons. It's firstly designed to keep out the water because sea levels have risen because of the climate change, and it's also designed to keep out people. It's a barrier preventing the starving, desperate millions of people fleeing other parts of the world from getting into this relatively safer place of this island in the North Sea. And the people fleeing the other parts of the world are known simply as the others. One of the premises of the book is that everyone in this country, every citizen of the country, has to do a form of national service. They have to spend a 2-year tour of duty standing guard on the wall to keep the others out. And as the novel begins, we're starting the first day of the tour of duty of the main character. He's a young man called Joseph Kavanagh. The story of the novel is the story of his experiences when he gets to the wall, what happens to him there, and the unravelling consequences of what this new world is like and what it's like to live in it. Because essentially, my imagination is that a world facing that degree of climate change would be effectively living through something like a world war. The scale of the change, the nature of the change, the way it permeates every aspect of daily life would be comparable to that of global conflict. It's been a strange experience, both writing the book and living through the world that it was published into. I started writing in early 2016. It was before Brexit, it was before Trump. I actually went back to double check, and then I started the book in spring, and Trump didn't mention a wall till July or August. So that was one of the many elements which is, in a way that's been very disconcerting, feels like it's emerged from the novel or emerged from my imagination and taken on a kind of horrible reality in the real world. The project of the book, I suppose what I was doing was I was imagining some of the trends that we see in the current world around us, and it's like an economist's graph where you see the line up to the moment, and then you see a sort of dotted line stretching into the future, which is a line of hypothesis or possibility, or a trend carrying in a certain direction. And I consciously chose to think about what it would be like if those trends carried on the way they're going, in two specific ways in particular. The first is in respect of the climate. Anyone who's studied the subject knows that there's a range of possible outcomes in the future, and it's hugely affected both by how sensitive the climate turns out to be to continued rise in emissions, and also whether and how much we change our behaviour to reduce the impact of emissions. But I was projecting the world I imagine is one that really carries on, unfortunately, the trajectory we're on now, which is by the central spread of probabilities in the UN reports on the subject is for about 3 degrees of warming, 3.5 degrees of warming by the end of the century, and that was the trajectory I imagine. And the other trajectory was about trends in our society and politics that are about increasing division and increasing barriers and the gaps between societies, the gaps between the rich world and the poor world, and I was envisioning a world in which that tendency has to become so marked that this country has effectively turned its back on the world, wants nothing to do with the rest of the world. And some of the things that have happened since 2016 have unfortunately been more or less on that trajectory. In terms of the literary influences I had in mind, I've asked a lot about whether I see the book as a dystopia, whether I was consciously writing a dystopia, and I don't at all disavow that label. I think it's a very effective way of describing the book, though I suppose I would say, in a sense, it was one stage, for me it's one stage more frightening than a dystopia, because in a sense I wasn't thinking of it as fiction, this alternate world. It's a projection from current reality, and certainly there's nothing fictional about climate change, and there's nothing fictional about the trajectory that we have been on and that we are currently on. So it's a one stage more scary than dystopia. It's a thing we're actually doing. I mean, does that count as a dystopia if you're actually doing it? I'm not sure it does. And there are various models and examples for literary dystopia in terms of Zemyatin, Orwell, Huxley, Atwood. They're all great writers, all great books. But as I say, I thought I was doing something slightly different, which is a non-fictional version of the possible future, not the future, a future rather, a future that could happen. And I suppose if I have a central ambition for the book, I mean, I do have an ambition for the book, I do have something I really want for the book, and my main ambition is to be wrong. I want this world not to happen. I think it would be a morally unconscionable thing for our generation, the people alive today, to permit to happen. And I think there's a very important imaginative project to look at what we are doing and face the consequences of what that would be like as part of our decision to not do that. We cannot leave this future behind us. And it's a very, very important part of that project to actually admit what we're doing, to look it straight in the eye and say, we cannot continue walking on this path. And that's, I hope, in a small way, what this book can help us do. That was the project of the book, to imagine a version of the future in order to stop it from happening. Thank you.